The New York Giants finished the 2023 season with a 6-11 record and missed the playoffs for the 6th time in 7 years. It was a truly difficult season for the Giants, and while their season wasn't going good before the 30-6 loss in Las Vegas, Daniel Jones tearing his ACL was the icing on the cake for the type of year it was for this franchise. The Giants started the year with a 40-0 loss to the Cowboys in Week 1, and at a point were down 20-0 in Week 2 against the Cardinals, before rallying from down 21 points in the second half to win with a score of 31-28. They would go on to lose the next 4 games to drop them to 1-5, and the worst loss in here, without a doubt, was the 24-3 loss to the Seahawks on Monday night, in which Daniel Jones threw a red zone pick 6, and Brian Daboll absolutely erupted after the play. There was also a point in here where right tackle Evan Neal questioned fans and asked if they flipped burgers, and it was a nightmare of a first half of a season. But things gradually got better down the stretch, and there was a fun few game span with Tommy DeVito as the team starting quarterback, but lost within the final 7 games of the year in a span where New York went 3-4, was how solid their defense was, and the fact they forced 21 turnovers during those final 7 games. They didn't look like Super Bowl champions by any means, but they looked a lot better than what we saw at times earlier in the year. And that brings us to the title of today's video. The New York Giants are a solid team, but have one big problem. And we're going to break everything down in today's video. Now let's begin. And we are starting today's video by breaking down who the Giants brought in free agency and who they lost in free agency, and also in this team's case, a trade. But from last year to this year, this team lost a few big players in free agency, and they were safety Xavier McKinney, running back Saquon Barkley, and defensive lineman A'Shawn Robinson. Xavier was a sizable loss because of how good of a player he is, combined with his relative youth of most free agents. McKinney was 20 years old when he was drafted back in 2020, and he turned 21 before the season started, but the point is, he's only 6 months older than Broncos rookie quarterback Bo Nix. So losing a 25-year-old safety coming off of the year McKinney had was big. He had over 100 tackles for the Giants last year and had 3 interceptions and was a really good player for them on the back end. The loss of running back Saquon Barkley was loud, but I don't think it was that big in the grand scheme of things. Saquon ran for 962 yards last year and has a singular 1,000-yard rushing season in the last 4 years. And not only that, but the Giants were 31st in EPA per rushing play, so it was a lot of fitting a square peg in a round hole. Now, the Saquon loss from an emotional standpoint and from him going to play for the division rival Eagles is an entirely different conversation, but from the player he was last year, and again outside of one good season in the last 4, it's really not that big of a loss, because the reality is this team was not a top 2 or 3 rushing team with him. So whether the back is Motor Singletary or Saquon, and the public opinion obviously differs between these players, the big question is, does it matter when you finished second to last in the NFL in EPA per rushing play last year? No. Xavier McKinney signed a 4-year, $67 million contract with the Packers, and Saquon of course went to the Eagles, but they had one other player sign a deal with an average annual value of $7.5 million, and that was A'Shawn Robinson signing with the Panthers. A'Shawn is a type of player I like a lot, and he's a mountain of a man at 6'4", 320 pounds, but with where this defense is going, it's not the end of the world in losing A'Shawn to the Panthers. He's a solid veteran defensive tackle, and sure, his production will be missed as he had over 60 tackles last year, but he's not irreplaceable and the Giants will be fine without him. This is also worth noting, but the Giants also lost Tyrod Taylor as he signed with the Jets to back up Aaron Rodgers. And honestly, Tyrod didn't play bad for the Giants last year, but again, he's a backup quarterback, and let's just call this what it is. The Giants, or any team, is not going to win a Super Bowl with Tyrod coming in relief. Now, the Giants brought in a few guys in free agency who will start right away. They brought in Jon Runyan from the Packers, they brought in running back Devin Singletary from the Texans, and right tackle Jermaine Illuminor from the Raiders. And also, yes, they brought in Drew Lock to replace Tyrod Taylor. They of course traded for star pass rusher Brian Burns, and I loved this move for several reasons. The first, of course, is he's a very good player, and he is most definitely a guy who can be the premier edge rusher for this team for the next half decade. He's only 26 years old, and I cannot emphasize enough how much I love the trio of Burns, Dexter Lawrence, and Kayvon Thibodeaux. And I know there's always a crowd that will mention that you have to pay a guy once you trade for him, but so what? The Giants gave up a second-round pick for Brian Burns and gave up their second-round pick to do so. Fortunately for the Giants, they had traded Leonard Williams during the middle of the 2023 season to the Seahawks and had 2 second-round picks. So, to me, the trade-off of dealing Leonard Williams and receiving Brian Burns for moving back 8 spots was 1000% worth it. They got younger with Burns, and obviously they played different positions, but I would rather have Brian Burns 100 out of 100 times than Leonard Williams moving forward. And quietly, this team has very good foundational pieces moving forward. Obviously, everyone knows about Dexter Lawrence, and the impact he has in every game cannot be understated. He is a truly dominant player from the interior, and teams have to game plan around him. And when you add in Brian Burns along with a former top 5 pick in Kayvon Thibodeaux, I mean, as long as the secondary isn't outright awful, which it's not, then you should be alright in the long run, and I think the Giants will be. Now, there were a few games last year where the Giants looked awful defensively. Giving up 640 yards to Dallas in Week 10 is a losing recipe every single time. But there were some positives down the stretch of the season, and to be completely honest, I think this team has a good amount of talent defensively. Linebacker Bobby Okereke was one of my favorite signings from the 2023 free agent cycle, and he played really good football throughout the 2023 season. And sure, there were times where 2023 first-round pick Deonte Banks got beat, but that's going to happen. One of the reasons why I liked the Burns move so much was because of what this is going to mean for the rest of the Giants' defense. Dexter Lawrence was really the only guy who could consistently get home last year, and I know Kayvon Thibodeaux had 11.5 sacks, but he was not consistently getting home. Despite the uptick in sacks from year 1 to year 2, he only had 3 more pressures in 2023 than he did in 2022, despite logging 111 more pass rushing snaps, and this is per PFF by the way. Kayvon had a pass rush win rate of just 6.4% and was not a typical 11.5 sack player by any means. Now, the reason why I like the Burns trade so much is because of what it represents for the rest of the defense. He is such a good pass rusher that he's going to free up Kayvon and give him one-on-one opportunities, and I think in a lot of ways this is a make or break year for him, KT that is. Make or break in the sense of, are you going to step up and be a guy who can be a 50-plus pressure guy consistently, or be a guy who gets cleanup sacks and occasionally gets after the quarterback? I love the situation Kayvon is in, obviously, but this year is going to set the tone for the next 4 or 5 years of his career. I also really like the idea of having Azeez Ojulari as a 4th rusher, and hopefully he can stay healthy, and this team should be able to get to the quarterback with relative ease in 2024. While the 2023 Giants defense certainly wasn't good at times, most notably during the Dolphins game and the Cowboys game, I personally refuse to believe they're going to be a bad unit in 2024 unless they are set up to fail countless times like they were last year. I mean, this team put up 20 or more points just once in the first 10 games of the season, which was against the Cardinals and ultimately a team that had the number 4 pick in the 2024 draft. Now, they did put up 24 or more points in 4 of their final 5 games of the season, and technically in 5 of their last 7 games, but there's a reason we talk about complimentary football on the channel. A lot. And when people say football is the ultimate team game, this is what they mean. The Giants' offense didn't do the defense any favors, and there were so many games where they would get down and opposing teams could pin their ears back and get after the quarterback, and when Evan Neal is one of your tackles, who also battled through some injuries last year, along with a not great offensive line outside of Andrew Thomas, and former right guard Mark Glowinski was especially bad, you're not going to set your defense up for success. And while I don't expect the Giants' offense to finish in the top 8 or 10 in points per game this year, I don't think it can get worse. And the reason we bring this up is because the Giants finished 29th in average time of possession last year offensively, and as we mentioned earlier, they really couldn't run the ball as well as you'd think, and it was setting the entire team up to fail. And this offense finished 30th in points per game last year. And thinking out loud, do you really think Brian Daboll is the 30th best offensive mind in the league? No. And if they can get back to being serviceable, along with the improvements made, the Giants defense will be fine. But that's the big question, is how will the Giants offense play this year? Now, the Giants' 2024 offense is a unit I have a lot of concerns about. Now, when you think of the Giants' 2024 offense, a lot of the time, it's Malik Nabers is going to be good, Andrew Thomas is already good, one of the best left tackles in the league, but after that, it's kind of, well, this unit stinks and good luck. And I don't want to take Malik Nabers in fantasy because Daniel Jones is his quarterback. That's generally the narrative with the 2024 Giants offense. But the reality is last year, whether the quarterback was Daniel Jones, Tommy DeVito, whoever, the quarterback was going to fail. I mean, that offensive line was awful. Again, outside of Andrew Thomas. Mark Lewinsky was bad. Evan Neal was bad. Ben Bredesen was bad. Justin Pugh on one Sunday night introduction introduced himself as Justin Pugh just came off the couch. And that's the type of year that it was for the 2023 New York Giants. Now, the whole Daniel Jones contract, I think, is a little overblown because they can get out of that this offseason. So, you know, they're not like the Broncos with Russ where they gave him this big contract and just guaranteed multiple years in advance and only for him to flop. Now, DJ, the player in 2022, was much different in 2023. And for reference, DJ finished 26th out of 41 quarterbacks in a pressure to sack ratio in 2022. And in 2023, he was second out of 45, meaning second most. And obviously, when you have that big of a difference in pressure to sack percentage, which is exactly what it sounds like, you know, how often are you under pressure versus how often do you get sacked? Obviously, you want that number as a quarterback to be lower because that means you're getting sacked less, and sacks more often than not are drive killers. But DJ's rate, for whatever reason, nearly doubled from 22 to 23. And I gotta be honest, I don't blame Joe Schoen for paying Daniel Jones the money he did, because you are paying the player for what they are going to do, not for what they have done in the past, but for what they are going to do. And in the first year of Daniel Jones and Brian Daboll, DJ looked serviceable. I mean, he looked like a solid quarterback. He didn't turn the ball over. He didn't really put the ball in harm's way. And if there was a time where he was under pressure, a lot of the time he would either, you know, roll out of the pocket and pick up 8 or 9 instead of it being a -6 or -7 play, or he would make a throw under pressure. And the player DJ was in year one with a new head coach and the player he was in year two were two completely different players even before the injury. So can Daniel get back to the player he was in 2022 is obviously the big question. And if he can, while he is probably a little overpaid, you have to remember that that's, I mean, the rate of which quarterbacks get paid is obviously different than any other position. I don't think Daniel Jones specifically is limiting this entire team and that they are absolutely doomed because of Daniel Jones. I think that is a bit of an exaggeration from the public standpoint. Now, I don't think Daniel Jones is a top 10, 12, top 15 quarterback, but at his best, he is a really solid player. But where he is at his best, or how often we get that player at his best versus what we saw in 2023, is honestly kind of a flip of the coin, which that is frustrating at times to say the least. Now, where I do have concerns with this offense is a lot of positions. Devin Singletary is an okay back. He's probably going to rush for anywhere from 700 to 900 yards, probably 4 to 7 touchdowns on the year. And while that's not bad, it's not great. And like we said, the Giants were 31st in EPA per rush last year, so whether it was Devin Singletary or Saquon Barkley, I don't think is going to make that much of a difference in the grand scheme of things, just from how the offense is going to be played against, because Saquon, it was a lot of, all right, buddy, you were drafted number 2 overall, make something happen. So the running back is more of a product of the offensive line. I mean, of course, the special ones are going to, you know, make that big difference, but I don't think that they're going to go from 31st in yards or EPA per rush to 32nd, and it's going to be all that big of a difference from what we saw last year to this year. Now, the receivers, I think, are okay. I don't think they're great, and I think at times the receivers on this team can get a little bit of a bad rap, at least worse than what it should be. I do think Malik Neighbors will go for over 1,000 yards this year if he stays healthy, but Wan'Dale Robinson is a okay player. I don't think he is as dismissive as some people want to make it out to be. Some people want to make it out to be that Malik Neighbors is kind of like that Ferrari in that garage meme, and I'll have a picture of that on the screen, and that's the rest of the offense. But Wan'Dale is okay. I like Darius Slayton a lot for what he is as a player. He's a good field stretcher. He will be a 600 to 800 yard guy again, and he's actually led the team in receiving yards in 4 of his first 5 seasons. So, again, I don't think the Giants receiving core is great by any means, but I don't think it's as bad as the media wants to make it out to be. I actually also really like tight end Daniel Bellinger, and I thought he had a decent rookie year back in 2022, and bringing in Darren Waller was a gamble. It really didn't pay off, obviously, but I think Daniel Bellinger in the right offense, if they give him enough opportunities, can be a 45 or 50 catch a year guy, and I think he is I think he can be an okay or an average tight end at the NFL level. Obviously, a lot of this is going to depend on the offensive line. We have no worries about the left tackle position. I think Andrew has that position solidified. But how will John Runyon play? How will John Michael Schmitz play? How will Jermaine Illuminor play? Those are going to be the questions for 2024. And if Daniel Jones can get back to the player he was in 2022, which again was not elite, but it was serviceable, and that's the big thing, I think they're going to be okay. I mean, the thing that I worry about in the long run with the Giants is I worry about Brian Daboll getting let go because of things that are out of his control. I mean, I don't think Daniel Jones at his peak is that bad of a player as people want to make him out to be, and I think the same thing kind of also applies to Devin Singletary, but they're not franchise-changing players, and I worry that if the Giants, because if they don't have enough firepower against the Cowboys and the Eagles and any other team like that I worry if they have a 6-11 or a 7-10 year that Brian Daboll gets let go when a lot of this is out of his control to begin with. So I do have some concerns with the 2024 Giants offense, but I don't think they're going to be great by any means. I don't think they're going to be in the top half of really any category. I just don't think that they are like 32nd absolute bottom of the barrel the way some people want to make them out to be. Now, for the Giants' 2024 rookie impact, I really liked their class, and they only had 6 selections, but I thought they had pretty impactful picks with the selections they made. It, of course, started with LSU receiver Malik Neighbors, and there's not a lot that needs to be said about Neighbors. He's a great football player, and I really think he would have been the best receiving prospect in the past 8 or 10 years if Jamar Chase and Marvin Harrison Jr. weren't receiving prospects during that same time period. And some people even had Neighbors over MHJ. I myself was not one of them. I thought MHJ was a little bit better of a prospect than Neighbors, but Neighbors rather is such a great player. And if he has less than 1,000 yards and plays all 17 games, I would be very surprised. The whole thing is that, Daniel Jones and Drew Lock aren't going to be able to get him the football if Daniel Jones is benched, but they're still going to pass the football. I mean, they're not going to go 0 for 30 in passing attempts in one game. So Neighbors is going to get his targets. He's going to be a great player. And bold prediction, I think Neighbors will go for over 100 yards in his NFL debut against the Vikings. Now, for the rest of the class, I really liked safety Tyler Nubin from Minnesota, and I think he's a very high IQ player, and I think he has a pretty high floor at the safety position. The only real knack in Nubin's game is that he's not a burner at the position, but I mean, you don't really need a 4.29, a 4.32, 40 safety roaming the back end. I mean, it'd be nice, it'd be a plus, but there's not a lot of teams that have that to begin with. So Nubin should transition fine to the NFL level, and I think he will be right around a 5, 6, maybe even 7-year starter at the position. I think he's a really good prospect, and I was kind of surprised he wasn't in the 2023 draft class. Now, Drew Phillips, nickel corner from Kentucky. I like his game a lot. Him and Deonte Banks are 2 good young corners to have for the next few years, and I think he will, like every corner, go through their transition phase, but I think he's going to be a solid player for them for the next few years, and you can never have enough corners in today's era, so not going to criticize any selection like that. And I thought Phillips was a little better than where he was selected. I thought he was maybe around like the 60th or 70th player that got him past the 80 mark, so thought that was a good selection for the Giants. Now, tight end Theo Johnson can be a polarizing player. Theo was a very, very athletic, athletic project coming out of Penn State, but Theo, to me, is not that player on a down-to-down basis, and some people see tight ends, especially tight ends every year, have these 6'6", 250-pound profiles that run 4.58 40s and throw up 24 reps on the bench. And, kind of thinking like a Madden mindset, like, oh man, this guy, he can stretch the field vertically. He can, dig guys out in the trenches, and he can be an all-around force. Theo was not that player at Penn State. I think he can be an okay player at the NFL level, but there was a reason he was selected in the 4th round and not in the top 50 or even higher than that. I hope he works out, but I would kind of limit my expectations for Theo Johnson. I think he can be an okay player, but I just don't think he's going to be for sure this super freak athlete that's going to make plays that not a lot of players can. Now for Tyrone Tracy, he had an injury during training camp. We, of course, hope he gets healthy and everything. It was a pretty scary, couple of hours whenever the injury was announced, because it was announced as something like non-contact, and everyone feared that Tyrone Tracy was going to be done for the year. But I like Tyrone a lot, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if he has a start or two in the 2024 season. And I think the backfield of Motor Singletary and Tyrone Tracy is a little slept on. I mean, I don't think it's like the best, 2 or 3 backfields in the league, but I think they will be more than serviceable. So all around, I really liked the Giants draft class for what it was, and I think Malik Nabers will be a stud at the NFL level for a very long time. The Giants open up their season with a home game against the Vikings and then travel to Washington to play the Commanders in week 2, and I would argue starting out 2-0 for this team is essential if they have any sort of chance at having success this year, meaning a trip to the postseason as a wildcard team, because I don't think they're going to win the division. Their schedule from weeks 3 to week 8 is very difficult as they play teams like the Browns, Cowboys, Eagles, Bengals, and Steelers, and I don't think the Giants are going to match up well against those teams, especially the Browns on the road, as I think their defense will suffocate the Giants' offense. But the thing to remember with the 2024 Giants is I don't think they're going to be a great team by any means. I don't think they're going to win 11 or 12 games, but I don't think they're going to be a cellar dweller either. I mean, this coaching staff is very good, and I think Brian Daboll is one of the better offensive minds in the league, without a doubt at that. But I think the offense is going to inevitably hold this team back a little bit. And again, I don't think they're going to be 31st or 32nd in the league in terms of total points per game or offensive yards or any of that. But I think they're going to be around 23rd or 24th, and that's inevitably going to hold them back when they play teams like the Bengals or teams like the Ravens or whoever, and especially the Cowboys, who outscored them in the 2 games they played last year, 89-17, and ultimately the Eagles as well. Now, the Giants are, again, they're not going to go 3-14 or even 4-13, but I think they're going to be maxed around 6-11 or 7-10, and I don't think they're going to make the playoffs this year. I think their ceiling is a 7-10 football team, but that's going to wrap up today's video. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please like and subscribe. That helps the channel tremendously, and if you like this content, you will like the Football Analysis Podcast. But that's all I have, and until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.